Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. and today I'm reviewing General Orders World War II from Osprey Games. General Orders is a World War II themed worker placement area control combat simulation for 2 players that takes place across 4 rounds or until one player loses their headquarters area in the game. The game is basically going to be a worker placement game. You're going to have your 5 commanders over here, these various generals you're going to be assigning to different spots on the board in order to invade, in order to attack, in order to parachute, in order to do a bunch of things in the game, with the ultimate goal either being to slowly move your forces, represented by these little cubes over here, not cubes, they're discs that is, these little discs over here, if you can move them slowly across the board into your opponent's headquarters, or alternatively, at the end of the game, at the end of 4 rounds, whoever has the most stars on the board from the various center regions that they control, that will be the winner of the game. So either an immediate end condition, or alternatively, just whoever has the most points at the end of it. To that end, what you're going to be doing in the game, across those 4 rounds of play, you're going to be picking a general and then assigning it to a spot to do one of several actions. The first action, and one of the most common ones, is going to be taking a general, putting it on one of these little hexes over here, and then marching your units into that hex. So for example, maybe I want to go ahead and take control of this artillery area, so I'm going to place that down there, and I'm going to put down 2 of my troops into that region. You can select any units from any regions that are adjacent and in supply. In supply means you have a connected line back to your headquarters that you can track over there. But you must leave at least 1 unit in this space behind you, and an important part that you might not realize until you start playing this game is as soon as you do so, by nature of taking that spot, your opponent cannot invade back right away. They'll have to wait till a future round to be able to invade because of the fact that this is worker placement. It means some degree of how you move, control, all these things you do. It's not just about getting to do it, it's about blocking your opponent from doing it because it's a worker placement area control game at the same time. So great, I've gone ahead, I've taken control of this region, I have 2 points of the game to end right now. It's now their turn. They're going to go ahead and they're going to start with a mobilization. So they're going to place their unit down here and collect 6 units from the board. I have the option of going ahead to this 5 unit spot, but it's 5 units, not 6, meaning they're going to get a unit more than me, and because of the nature of the game, because you can't actually take both reinforced spots, that represents a 2 unit swing, which matters more than you think in this game. They're going to go ahead and put it down. They are limited to 5 units per region, but they're going to start stocking up over here, trying to prep. Maybe they buttress their, over here, they'll buttress that as well, so it's a little more defended. You know what, honestly, let's put 1 more over here and see how this plays out. They're going to put 3 units over there, so they have 3 down there, and I'm going to respond by placing a unit down here, and then launching an airstrike up to 3 zones away, so 1, 2, 3. Sadly, you can't get to their zone over there, but I could launch an airstrike, and that's, yeah, we're going to go ahead and attack this area here. So I'm going to grab 2 dice and roll them, although I actually grab a 3rd die because I have control of this area, so I can go ahead and attack them. It's 1, 2, 3. We're going to roll, and I got 1, 2, 3 hits on that zone, so it's going to be 3 hits, 3 units dead, which means they can't use that to invade now because they only have 1 unit left. So that was a good roll over there. I stopped one of their offensive advances, and now I can respond accordingly. Unfortunately for them, they just locked themselves a little bit out of that, so they have to figure out what else they want to do, and to that end, they're going to go ahead and launch a parachute. A parachute drop over here is going to have you dropping 2 units into any spot on the board, not this zone or this zone, and not your opponent's headquarters, so almost any spot on the board, and they're just going to go ahead and drop in 2 units right over here onto this spot, because by going over there, they'll have the opportunity of drawing more cards in a second. So I might try to go ahead and counter that. How do I want to counter that? Because I could attack into there, although it likely will result in me dying. I could launch an offensive airstrike with my parachutes, but again, likely would result in me dying. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and respond by dropping 2 units over here into this zone to take control. So I'm going to take control of this zone over here, so hopefully protecting myself in that center zone where I have stronger defense by doing so. Although alternatively, you know what, actually I'm going to counter back. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to go over here and then take control of this zone, giving me a 3 drop parachute, which might be what I need to be able to take control over here, or at least stop them from taking control. They see that, and so they're going to respond by immediately going over here where they can draw 3 cards. This zone over here, you can draw 3 cards, or draw 1 card plus take turn order control for next round. Now again, with both the reinforce and the planned spots over here, you can go to any ones you want, but you're only limited to 1 per column. So he can't go reinforce 5 more units over there, but he does have this smorgasbord of cards over here, which are incredibly helpful. Looks like you got 2 mobilize and a blitz. These are going to be very helpful cards because they both help you re-roll whenever you're re-rolling, or alternatively, it's an either or. Alternatively, using their ability, mobilize gives you more troops, and blitz lets you take a bit of a running control of being able to march into consecutive zones, which is incredibly devastating. In fact, they might use it this round. Maybe not, I don't know. We'll see, we'll play it out. So, back to over here. Now that my parachutes drop 3 over here, I'm going to try to attack this zone, because they already got their 3 cards, but hopefully I can wrest control of that zone, although they can just take control right back. Maybe that was a mistake. Honestly, they probably should have gone over there with that. Whatever, plays out different ways. You know what? Actually, I think I'm not. I think I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do instead is I'm actually going to drop this unit over here. So I can't do that. Drop this unit over here like so. Ah, it's a mistake. It's a horrible mistake. I'm not going to win. You know what? We're going to go ahead and mobilize. We're going to go drop that there and drop 5 units onto the board in different zones. So we're going to put, 3 up here because I think that's important, and hopefully it'll enable me to conquer there. But then also, I can put 2 in different zones. You know what? Let's go ahead and buttress this over here. Try to just lock in those zones, make them a little stronger as things go. Lots of options on the table over here. I could have taken that. I could have tried. There's so many things. So many things. I want to do everything in this game. Even with this fake simulation of what I'm doing here, I want to do everything. Now it's their turn over here. They're going to take this over here, and they can't really march in here as easily as they'd like. They could march in here, so they'll go ahead and march in here. They're going to march 4 units into that zone, taking control of that region, which is a nice supply control, because this will really make it so it's much harder for your opponents to disrupt your supply lines in the game. From there, it's back to me. I could draw a card and maintain first position, but I already have first position, so it's not as advantageous. I might just try to go over here. I think I will. I think I'm going to drop over here and then drop 2 units into there, which should be enough to repel some degree of invaders in this. And then their last action, they can't move here. I mean, they could, they can't move there. What can they do? They're actually a little limited in what they can do right now. Because they could, you know what, they could go over here. I think they'll do that. They'll go ahead and place this down over here and march a single unit there. At least it gives them that defensive control because you haven't seen a battle yet. And thus ends the round. This will go ahead and move up the track over here. They have their 3 cards over here. They're not going to use them right now. Everyone's going to pull their things back, and we're going to go ahead and I'll resolve 1 combat in order to show you how things play out before going to the review over here. So we're going to take these back. Now it's my turn over here, and now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how our combat operates by taking this unit over here and marching into here. So we're going to grab this, we're going to place it directly on there, and I'm going to march 3 units into this zone. And the way this works is my opponent over here gets to roll a single die defensively, and they got nothing. The dice over here have 4 1s, a 2, and a 0. They got nothing, unfortunately, but had they gotten that, they get 1 free attack, and then after that, you remove units in equal measure. So over here, we have 1 unit from each side over here. We're going to remove those, and now I have control of the zone, and I can draw more cards, which is pretty helpful, because honestly, I want those cards. That's basically how you play general orders. You're placing your workers back and forth to be able to march into zones, which will limit other players from going there. To take control of these center benefits, over here, you get to roll an extra die when doing an artillery strike. Over here, you get to draw an extra card. Over here, you mobilize 2 more forces when you reinforce. Over here, you get an extra force when you parachute drop. And over here, this one's locked on the board. This one's not variable. These are variable. This one over here gives you an extra defensive die. If somebody wants to invade there, I get to roll 2 dice defensively, which that was still a terrible roll, but you get a much stronger chance of taking down more opponents, giving you a more defensive aspect going on. That's everything on this side of the board, and I'm risking flipping it. Let's go ahead and flip the board over here, because on the other side of the board, you also have the other side, which is going to involve a few more things, but specifically, you're going to have airplanes. These airplanes that I didn't really talk about, they're going to be on the other side of the board, and you're going to have air zones. So you have this is a single air zone, this is an air zone, this is an air zone, and this is an air zone. You put your airplanes in these various supply zones over here, and they can feed into different areas where you have additional air combat, but you have air combat, you have dropping bombs, you have a whole bunch of other options on the table if you play on this other side of the board. And that is basically General Orders World War II from Osprey Games, designed by David Thompson and Trevor Benjamin. And with that, let's talk about my review, opinion of the game, all of that. Overall, ease of play, starting off with ease of play. The game itself is around half an hour long once you know what's going on. The first game might drag out a little bit more, but once you know what's up, the game is around half hour long for 2 players. The ease of play, learning the game, is mostly easy with the caveat that the game teaches you both ways to play at the same time. So you're reading sections of text and then paying attention to different sides depending on which side you're engaging in, and that's a slightly confusing way to learn any game. You're kind of absorbing and dismissing information at the same time. It's not my favorite, but I'd say that the game is still simple enough. It was not a huge barrier, but it was slightly confusing to go through that. I'd almost rather a section of different changes, but I recognize that referencing it makes it harder, so overall fine, slightly confusing for the learn. Past that, as far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like, which there's a lot here that I like. The combination of worker placement plus invasion plus area control works so well, specifically because of the fact that you know that as soon as you take control of a zone over here, your opponent can't go in there. Your opponent can't get into that zone as soon as you've gone there. And that changes everything. It changes the way you engage with the game, because sometimes it's not about having that superior military force, it's just about getting there first. But you want to get to everything first, because everything matters so much. Get that first bonus, you can use it for your next action. Get more units than your opponent, get more cards than your opponent. Those cards, by the way, the cards are so essential. These cards, some of these cards are just game breaking in terms of the way they mess with your opponent's strategy. You know, ambush, roll 2 additional black dice when your opponent invades you. You have a handful of cards and your opponent is terrified as far as how things will work out for or against them across the course of the round. And there's so many different ways you can do this. There's so many different ways you can approach and engage with the system as far as small touch points of what you can do that pushes your control faster or better than your opponent's. It's just so satisfying to be able to like line up an assault on your opponent's headquarters and actually be able to have a whole stack of units, which I dumped off to the side of the board over here, but to have a whole stack of units about to invade your opponent's headquarters and having them to react defensively because that is a win condition. Sure, it's about getting these bonuses and about getting those stars and getting those points, but ultimately if I can just maraud my units towards your headquarters and put you on the defensive, suddenly the entire line of combat has changed. Previously, we were fighting over the center. Now you're just on the defense because your headquarters is easier to defend, but you still have to work to defend it. You still have to put in that effort, and now while you're doing that, you're distracted, and I can deal with the center. And there's so many ways you can push on these slight adjustments, and the cards are powerful. The bonuses are incredible. These bonuses you line up in the center, there's a variable set of bonuses over here. They're all in your card over here. So not a ton over here, but you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bonuses, and you're going to be using 5 every single game. And so that's going to give you slight different ways of what you're trying to do and how you interact with the game state, how you interact with what's adjacent to what as you try to get those, because they are incredibly important. They will decide who wins the game if you have the right bonus. If you're rolling extra artillery dice every round, you're just taking out that many more units, and it gives you a slight push on your opponent that they have to figure out how they're going to counter. The 2 win conditions forces a delicate game state. The fact that you can win by going for points and just trying to last 4 rounds and who has the most points, but the fact that you can push towards your opponent changes the way the game is played. I generally appreciate and enjoy games that give you multiple win conditions because it forces your opponent to be on the defensive all the time. It gives you ways to push on different fronts, just like a real war. Not that real war is anything to be proud of, but it gives you a lot of strategic ways to leverage the game, which I really enjoy and appreciate. Just the many ways there are to approach this game, the many things you're trying to do as far as how to place your workers to get things. It's just incredibly satisfying. The 2 maps give you a bit more gameplay. I like the fact that the game's not just one map, it's an additional map in the box with additional rules, so if you're getting bored of the first game or you just want things to spice things up, you get to switch to the other side and suddenly you're dealing with all these airplanes, which is the same game system but just a drop more going on. I do recommend, by the way, starting on the non-airplane side. The game is not that hard as far as the rules, but understanding how the rules weave together is a different story, and I recommend getting a few games without airplanes under your belt before you move to the other side, but then going back to the first board is still just as satisfying. I also like the dice rolling. The dice rolling aspect, which we're going to get into as far as things you might not like, but I like the fact that there are dice rolling in the game. When you're launching your artillery attacks, when you're attacking your opponent, every defensive roll, you get 1 die to roll defensively, and the reason I like that is because it forces the game to not purely be a game of pure optimization. You can't perfectly plan how things will go because you have to account for the unknown. Sure, most of the time you're just going to get 1 hit, but sometimes you'll get 2, sometimes you'll get 0, and both offensively and defensively that means you're not acting with perfect information just like in real war, and so you're dealing with that aspect of trying to figure out how to optimize, but not being stuck in a perfect simulation where you can math everything out, rather there's just enough chaos to stop that state from occurring. As far as what I don't like in the game, I wish there was more already to the game. I mean, this is a small box game. I want like 4 more maps, 4 more rule set tweaks, adjustments. I think the game system is incredibly clever. I want more bonuses. I don't know how many ways you can add bonuses, but I want more things to the game. I think that the game is incredibly well done, and it is a tight, tough back and forth, but it's one thing that it's so enjoyable at what it does that I already want to see more from the system, which is kind of a cop-out as far as things I don't like, but I do want more in the box. This is a small box with a limited amount of stuff going on, and so you are playing the same things again and again, but it's still good enough that I'm okay with that, but I do want more already. I will say that the randomness of the card draw strength, that is a big deal for me. I like the dice randomness. I do enjoy that a lot because I think it adds just enough chaos. But the cards, on the other hand, they're so variable as far as how they're good for you and when they're good for you. You haven't even seen some of the things they do. But again, those 2 defense, where you roll 2 extra defensive dice when you're defending, that's a big deal. Versus adding two more units to the board when you're deploying, that's not nearly as good. And so there are different strengths of the cards, both just an inherent strength of the cards, but also in when they're good for you and how they're good for you. And I will say that having 3 cards could be the difference between you winning the game or not, depending on how those cards suit what you're trying to do. And so the card swinginess is a much larger factor. I still like them. I want that craziness in the game. I guess I wish all the cards were equally good, and at least for myself, I don't feel they are. Situationally good, you can't account for. There's only so much you can do, unless you are drawing more cards and discarding some. The game's great as is, but I will acknowledge that the card swinginess can be a factor in who wins or loses. So can dice, but I think the control and the range is much more limited there. As far as what I can see others not liking, the dice, I mean, the dice are a factor. I like the additional little chaos it adds, but at the end of the day, there's a difference between 2 and 0, and that can happen. It's a big swing. Most time it's 1, but the difference between 2 and 0 is large, and if one player is rolling a bunch of 2s and another player is rolling a bunch of 0s, that can be frustrating for that player. I'll say that in general, the theme, I mean, World War II is very hit or miss. It's a little more real. Even now, throughout this review, like, twice now, I'm like, that's, like, real war, and every time I felt a little dirty saying it. Like, I like the fantasy warfare. I like that abstractness of sci-fi combat and whatever, and I mean, World War II as a theme doesn't turn me off of games, but it certainly doesn't pull me into it. It's just a drop more real than what I'm looking for in my gaming downtime, and it might be as for you as well. And then lastly, I'll say hitting your opponent's base is very hard. Actually winning through a headquarters combat, through a headquarters takeover, that is very tricky, and it's one of the things that's very rarely happens in this game. For me, I still love that dynamic because just the ability for it to happen forces your opponent to react, and so for me, it's not about whether it happens, it's more about the fact that pushing towards that direction forces your opponent to engage, or it will happen, and that changes the game state on its own. So even though it's much rarer, it still forces a dynamic, and I appreciate the levers it puts on the game, even if the actual impact isn't as present. It's actually very similar to Inish. If you ever played Inish, they have 3 win conditions, and one of them, being Chieftain over 6 clans, is so incredibly rare, but it forces a dynamic of how the game operates that still makes it incredibly essential, even though I don't know if I've ever seen it happen. I don't know if I have. I'd have to, like, I don't know. Anyways, which brings us to final thoughts on general orders over here. I love this game. I read the rules, and again, World War II, so who knows. David Thompson and Jeff Benjamin, they have a lot of cred, and so to that end I was excited, and, you know, that's great, but I read the rules, and I was like, this seems a little simple. And then I sat down, and within like 30 seconds of starting to play, I started to realize how everything seemed to matter and how I wanted to do everything. And again, it started with me thinking it would be okay. I played it a few times, review it, move on, and within a few minutes, I was already incredibly in love with this game as far as the simpleness of the system, but how tightly it executes. It's brilliantly designed. It's incredibly well done. I feel every single thing I'm doing matters, and I feel such a degree of accomplishment when my plans come together, and such a degree of, like, you know, almost happiness at my opponent when they're able to, like, you know, get in the way of my plans. You know a game is good when you see yourself losing and you still appreciate what your opponent has done and how they've done it. And you're just like, you're reveling in the moment of oh, that was a good play. That was a good, you drew the cards, you did that. That was good. I'm very satisfied that you're beating me with that combo, and that does happen in this game. It's brilliant. I love it. It's a 4.5 out of 5. I'm really very into what this game is doing, and I was not expecting to be there. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, another incredibly well done war game that with a re-theme that was thrown onto it. Air, Land, and Sea. Specifically, my favorite is Critters at War. It does take the realism of war out and substitutes it for cartoon animals, but ultimately it's a very quick small box game that is going to be, again, 2 players head to head. If you want something that's incredibly tactically rewarding to play through, both these games are very much going to do it for you. And if you're looking for something else in the same vein, Caesar Sees Rome in 20 Minutes from PSC Games is another great game that's going to have you trying to place things down and tactically get one over your opponent as you go back and forth head to head, trying to figure out, again, multiple pathways to victories as far as how you chase it. All 3 of these are phenomenally well done games that I highly recommend. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.